Hello dear students, I, Mrs. Rajashree Naik, welcomes you again in online lecture series arranged by Gokhale Education Society's B.Y.K College of Commerce, Nashik. In the last online lecture, we have covered meaning of public revenue, sources of public revenue, types of taxes, and non-tax revenue sources. Today, in this lecture, we will study the next part of chapter number 8. So students, in this lecture, we are going to study about structure of public finance at a glance. In that, public debt, two types of public debt, internal debt, and second number, external debt, then fiscal policy and expected questions. Now let us study about public debt. Like a private individual, the government also needs to raise loans. In fact, raising debt is the most common activity of any government because government expenditure generally exceeds government revenue. So public debt policy of the government plays an important role in public finance. In other words, we can say public borrowing or public debt is an instrument of fiscal policy is of recent origin. Public borrowing or public debt as an instrument of fiscal policy is of recent origin. As mentioned in the Encyclopedia Britannica, public debt refers to obligation of governments, particularly those evidenced by securities, to pay certain sums to the holders at some future date. In fact, public debt is constituted when the government floats loans and borrows from the public. Government needs to borrow when current revenues fall short of public expenditures. The instruments of public borrowings are in the form of various types of government bonds and securities. In any budget, the proceeds from public borrowings constitute the revenue of a capital nature, while the provision for their payment and servicing is regarded as an expenditure of a capital nature. Payment of interest on loans borrowed is, however, a charge on the revenue account on the budget. Students, let us study about necessity of public borrowing, okay, or we can say objectives and aims of public debt. A public debt in modern times constitutes an important part of the total asset. Total asset may be public and private, created in the economy for financing the ever-increasing public expenditures. Huge loans, internal as well as external, are floated by the governments from time to time, with the result that a huge national debt has become a prominent feature of modern public finance. Third objective, or we can say third necessity, in modern economics, the public debt creation is perfectly justified in the following situation. Okay, now let us study about the situation. What are the situations which are called as these are the necessity of public borrowing, or we can say public debt. Now, the first situation, number one, during war period. Second, in times of depression. Third, to meet unprecedented expenses. Fourth, to curb inflation. Fifth, development finance. Sixth, to provide for social services. Seventh, to finance public enterprises. Eighth, to meet emergency. Ninth, growing public expenditure. 10th, for developing smooth relations in the political field. And the last one is 11th, miscellaneous objectives. So these are the objectives, or we can say aims of public debt. Now, the next part is there are mainly two types of public debt. Okay, they are internal debt and external debt. Now about internal debt. When a government borrows from its citizens, banks, central bank, financial institutions, business houses, etc., within the country, it is known as internal debt. Okay. And then what do you mean by external debt? When a government borrows from foreign governments, foreign banks, or institutions, international organizations like International Monetary Fund, World Bank, etc., it is known as external debt. Now, students, let us study about difference between internal debt and external debt. Point number one, difference point number one. Internal debt refers to the public loans floated within the country. Okay, and external debt refers to the loans taken from foreign governments. Second point, an internal loan may be voluntary or compulsory, but an external loan is normally voluntary in nature. Only in case of a colony, an internal loan can be raised by compulsion. Third point, internal debt is always in terms of the domestic currency. On the contrary, external debt is in terms of foreign currency. Fourth point, internal debt is usually for a shorter period as compared to external debt. Fifth point, internal debt is controllable and can be estimated beforehand with certainty. And on the contrary, external debt are always uncertain and cannot be estimated so confidently. So foreign government can stop the payment of a sanctioned loan at any time. Its realization is very much conditioned by international politics and foreign policies of the lending government. Okay, now let us study about fiscal policy. Now the meaning of fiscal policy. Fiscal policy is the means by which a government adjusts its spending levels and tax rates to monitor and influence a nation's economy. It deals with the public expenditure, public revenue, and public debt. In short, it is the financial policy implemented by the government. Now, in other words, we can say fiscal policy is an instrument of macroeconomic policy. Fiscal policy is an instrument of macroeconomic policy. It has been very popular with modern governments to influence the size and components of national product, employment, industrial production, prices, etc. The deliberate use of fiscal policy as a possible means to achieve and maintain full employment and price stability in the economy is a characteristic feature of past 4 decades. The significance of fiscal policy, or we can say the importance of fiscal policy as an instrument of economic control, was first emphasized in the mid-1930s by Keynes in the General Theory of Employment, Interest and Money. A working definition can be derived from Keynes' writings. He used the term fiscal policy when referring to the influence of taxation on savings and of government investment expenditure financed by loans from the public. For the purpose of interpretation of Keynes, we can define fiscal policy as a policy that uses public finance as a balancing factor in the development of the economy. Government activities are regards spending, taxing, borrowing, deficit financing, and budgeting are known as fiscal activities, and the purposeful manipulation of these activities to attain desired objectives, say economic stability, rapid economic growth, and full employment, is known as fiscal policy. Okay, now let us see the components of fiscal policy. Okay, number one, budgetary policy. According to Professor J.M. Keynes, it is essential that the government should incur large deficit in the budget and then meet these deficits either by borrowing from the banks, etc., or through printing fresh currency notes. It will inject fresh purchasing power in the economy and helping it to fight depression and employment effectively. Okay, so second component, Taxation policy. In order to fight depression and unemployment, taxation policy of the government, according to Keynesians, should be so designed as to stimulate both consumption and investment. Simultaneously, the only way to do it successfully is to reduce the general burden of taxation on the community. Third component, public debt. Public debt can also be employed by the government as an instrument to fight depression and unemployment. The deficits in government's budget shall have to meet partly, if not wholly, through public borrowings. And the next component, last component, fiscal policy is public expenditure. An increase in public expenditure can also be employed by the government as an instrument to fight against depression and unemployment. Okay, so now these are the components of fiscal policy, that the budgetary policy, taxation policy, public debt, and public expenditure. Now let us study about objectives of fiscal policy. So what are the objectives of fiscal policy? First objective, economic stabilization. Fiscal policy in the modern era subscribes the following major economic goals. Now these objectives are also called as macroeconomic goals. So the first objective, economic stabilization. The first and foremost objective of fiscal policy is to eliminate cyclical fluctuations in economic activity and by maintaining it at state level. The up and down swings in business are checked by compensatory fiscal action to counteract fluctuations. Strict steps are taken to control both inflation and deflation, and efforts are made to make the budget more or less balanced over the period of the cycle. Okay, second objective, economic growth. The second important objective of fiscal policy is to maintain a continuous upward trend in economic activity. Okay, to maintain a continuous upward trend in economic activity. Total outlay is increased in depression, but it is not allowed to decrease correspondingly in boom. Stability continues to be an important aim of fiscal policy. Now, third important objective of fiscal policy, break the vicious circle of poverty. Another objective of fiscal policy is to break the vicious circle of poverty and to use in rapid development of both agriculture and industry. Now, next one is provide full employment. Fiscal policy is considered as an effective instrument for reducing unemployment and securing full employment. Full employment occurs when there is job available for everyone who is fit to work and wants a job at the prevailing wage rates. To accelerate the rates of savings, or we can say investment and capital formation. To bring, now the next one is the fifth one. Okay, before that, see, the fifth one is to accelerate the rates of savings, investment and capital formation. Sixth objective, to bring stability in prices. Seventh objective, to restrict monopolies and check the concentration of economic power in fewer hands only. Eighth objective, to establish balance in foreign trade. Ninth one, to have rapid economic development in the country. 10th one, in case of developed countries, the main objective of fiscal policy is to have long-term stability. Now see, the first four objectives are the main objective, and then 5 to 10 or 5 to 11, these are the sub-objectives of fiscal policy. Okay, so 10th one, just I said, in case of developed countries, the main objective of fiscal policy is to have long-term stability. 11 number, in case of underdeveloped and developing countries, the main objectives of fiscal policy are promoting the growth of savings and investments and reducing income and wealth inequalities. Okay, students. Now, expected questions. Answer the following. What is public debt? And explain the types of public debt and what is fiscal policy. So students, this is all about today's lecture. So in this lecture, we have covered meaning of public debt, types of public debt, and fiscal policy. In the next online video lecture, we will go with next part of chapter number 8. Till then, have a safe time. Thank you.